lovely people. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing something super exciting, and I have a really awesome person here to talk to me about their writing process. She is the author of one of the books that I have talked about on my channel here, and a new book that has just come out this previous month, and we're going to be talking about her writing process. So we have Hannah, also known as HJ Nelson, joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So, like you said, I'm an author. I just had my second book come out, The Last City, and I started writing originally on Wattpad. I'm just really excited to talk about sort of my journey to get here as an author and what it looks like every day to be an author.
I've come up with some questions to just chat about, knowing that you have two physical books that I can hold in my hands out in the world, which is so amazing and exciting, right? They're like there. It's not just a document online. So exciting. When did you know in your life, if you have like a experience of a memory or just something, that you wanted to be a writer or a storyteller and do this?
A great question. So I feel like as a kid, I like voraciously read books. I remember sometimes in the summer I'd read one book a day, like a full young adult book. I would read a whole book in a day, and that was like a good day for me. But I also kind of thought authors were like this like mystical figure that you couldn't actually be. That was kind of like, and my family's just, they're like very practical family. And it wasn't that I was discouraged from being a writer. I just didn't think that was something people like actually could do. So it wasn't till it was like around college that a friend told me about Wattpad, and I started writing there and was super surprised when people started liking The Last She. It was sort of like I had written all this other stuff, but I'd never shown it to anyone. And that was it was the first book I ever finished writing. I started so many books, but that was the first book I ever wrote like the end and got all the way through. And it was just like a really powerful feeling of, oh, like people actually like this and are engaging. Like people would leave comments and ask when the next chapter was coming. So it was like the first time, like I'd always wanted to be a writer, but it was the first time I thought like, whoa, like maybe this could actually be reality. So yeah, it just took me a long time to kind of accept that like, oh yeah, I actually could do this.
Do you feel like your inner child is like, oh my gosh, I'm like a superstar. I'm like this mystical being. I wrote books.
I still feel like I have that imposter syndrome sometimes. Like sometimes like it's so cool to have the second book out, but now in some ways I'm even like, oh my gosh, there's like a second book out. It's like even scarier than just having one that could be like a fluke, but now there's two out there. Like, ah. So I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to imagine what like talking to like my younger self would say. I think my younger self would be like really happy, but also have no idea like the amount of work that goes into it. Cause I had no idea the amount of work of getting like, I feel like writing the book now is almost the easy part. Like all the rest of publishing is the difficult part.
Oh man, I can't wait to get to the part where writing is the easy part. How many books have you written aside from these two that are physical? Like, how many of your stories on Wattpad would you consider are what could be a book if they were printed off?
So that's a really great question because people have kind of different answers to this. Like I said, The Last She was the first book I wrote the end on. I had all these other writings and stuff, but it was kind of just like I feel like all my other stuff was sort of like practice. That was the first book I fully finished, and then I went on and wrote on Wattpad the next two books in the series. But when I got like the Sony deal and the publishing deal for The Last She, I actually went back and I didn't rewrite The Last She from scratch because I'd spent a lot of time on that book. Like I'd had agents read it who were interested in it, and I just spent a lot of time on it. So it wasn't like a full rewrite, but I did a ton of work on that book. And then like same with I completely rewrote The Last City, which just came out. That was a full rewrite. Like I saved nothing. I started completely over. It was a whole different plot. I just wanted to go in a different direction. And I'm rewriting the third book right now. So it's like kind of weird that I chose to I just felt like I was a much better writer now. Like I'm really glad I practiced those books and wrote them where people were reacting. But like I changed enough things that it was just easier to like I felt like instead of just putting band-aids on things that were broken, it was just easier to restart with the writer I am now. So I I have, two published books, one that's going to publish in the fall. And then on Wattpad, I have two other books that I would say are done, but might never get published. One's called Rel and the Rose, which is like a YA fantasy Beauty and the Beast retelling. I don't think that's quite good enough to get published, so I'll probably just leave it up on Wattpad. And then I have one called The Belly of the Beast, which I would love to see published, but like it's like the Hunger Games in space. It's sort of like in traditional publishing, the Hunger Games sort of trope right now, like trial by combat is really, really dead.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't like quite find a space for that. So it's in like the creators program, which means like anyone can read it. And I just update every week a new chapter. So yeah, it's kind of weird also being an author. Sometimes you realize, oh, you write a book, but there's like no space for it kind of right now in traditional publishing. And you just have to like pivot, which is really interesting because I used to think, oh, you just write a book and if it's good enough, it'll get published, but that's not always the case. So yeah, I don't know if that was really an answer. Like 4 to 5-ish books I've kind of written, but there's been others that, exist on Wattpad.
To go off of that, I know you have The Last She still up on your Wattpad because I did a little bit of stalking of you for the video that I did. It's got a different cover, and The Last City has a different cover on Wattpad. Is The Last City that's up on Wattpad this version? Because it's behind a paywall, or is it still the original version that was on Wattpad?
So this is where it gets interesting. So the original versions that I wrote that have different covers, which you actually talked about in your video, you're like, oh, if I had seen this original Wattpad cover, I wouldn't read it because it didn't say anything. Those are the original Wattpad stories that I wrote that are like the really old version. And the covers they had were someone that I think I paid them like $20 or something to make me these covers. So they were like, I mean, they're not like the best covers. It was just all I could afford at that time because I was just a Wattpad writer. So those ones with those covers that aren't like the published ones, those are like the way original ones. And then Wattpad itself posts the final book. They post like this book with this cover on Wattpad as well. And that's behind a paywall. And I'm trying to think I think they might have also paywalled my like originals, but I don't tell people to read those ones because they're just like unless you're curious, like, oh, what did this book start as? And now like, what did it become? Like, as if you have that curiosity as like a writer, you could go look. But yeah, kind of the covers will tell you like, if it's these covers, then it's just the version, it's the final version, but Wattpad posted it on Wattpad so you can read the final. But yeah, my originals are still up there, but I don't really like direct people to them anymore. They're just like, it's like having like a scrapbook up there. Like it's fun for me to be like, oh, those were like the original books when I was like really still like learning how to be a writer.
Were those books that you originally posted how you got the deal with Wattpad to publish these books and then give you the opportunity to do those edits and rewrites? Or did you do the edits and rewrites and then be like, please publish this?
Yeah, so Wattpad, it was The Last She, the first one that kind of blew up and that they wanted to publish. I actually think they brought the publishing deal and the Sony deal to me at the same time, which was kind of crazy that they're like, we want to publish this and Sony is interested in optioning it. It's like, what is happening? In hindsight, I kind of wish I hadn't written like the second and third books because it was just like kind of this so it was the original Wattpad book that they were interested in. And I kept publishing on Wattpad, but like it was me who later said, oh, I want to completely rewrite these books. I think they would have been fine with like working with the Wattpad version. I had just at that point written like more things and felt like, oh, I want to like really dig in and make this feel like publish worthy, like traditional publish worthy. Cause I felt like on Wattpad, I was in school, I was writing a chapter every week. And like a lot of it was the original manuscript was like 140,000 words, which is way too long for a young adult sci-fi. They want you like under 100K. So I had to cut down like 40,000 words, which is a ton.
Yeah. So you didn't preposition anybody to publish your book. They came to you.
Wattpad came to me. I tried to pitch my book to agents and they were all like, oh, we love the success you're seeing on Wattpad. This is awesome. Bring us your next book because we don't want a book that's already posted online. So it was like one of those hard things because my heart was in the series. I wanted to write like the full trilogy, but all the agents were saying like, no way, we won't take a book that is already online. So Wattpad was the only one who was willing to go further with it.
That makes sense because they want to be able to like take it away from the opportunity for other people to read it without paying them because they make the money off of the books. But Wattpad's still invested either way.
No, it worked out great. So
that is something that is good to know if you're like a newer author and you want to write a series and you're passionate about the series, maybe trying something in the same genre that's not necessarily that passion project and putting that
Yeah.
somewhere where people can read it so you can get like a following for your writing as being a potential
Yeah.
to pitch to agents and other people for traditional publishing. Smart.
Oh yeah. And I would definitely tell people like write the first book in your series, but maybe don't write the whole series. Like, kind of like wait and see where that one is going to go. Like if it is publishing that you want, don't like write the whole series. And then yeah, with Wattpad, it's definitely smart to like not put everything out there. Like you definitely want to like while it is nice to build an audience and be like strategic, I wouldn't just put everything out online, especially if you're seeking like traditionally published. So yeah, I think you kind of just have to be strategic about those things.
So, why'd you choose your pen name? Why HJ instead of Hannah?
I wish I had a cooler story about this, but I feel like I originally when I created Wattpad, I was literally expecting no one to read my books at all. And so like my original username was like one that they generated. It was like Hannah Nelson 803 or something like, I don't know, just like, and I was like, so at some point I was like, I should just change it. Hannah Nelson just doesn't sound like, I know like JK Rowling, there's other like famous female authors who take and I was just like, oh, like I'll just do HJ Nelson. So that was just my username on Wattpad. And then that was kind of what, when the book started taking off, people would call me like HJ or HJ Nelson. That was what they knew me as. So it was just like, it just became easier to like stay as HJ Nelson. So I don't know if it was ever like, if I had thought more about it at the beginning, I might have chosen something different, but it kind of just was like what I fell into. And now it's just like, oh, I just like it as my pen name. Now I don't want to leave it. So
Yeah, I get that. My full name is Samantha, and I just have been Sammy for so long that like if I claim something,
yeah.
it's gonna be under Sammy over anything else. But I've got this weird thing. I actually just recorded a video the other day about like the things that I'm insecure about, which will go
Oh,
up
yeah.
before this video, so I can link it. I don't know which side it's on in Zoom, but I was talking about how like I'm so worried about the concept of having to do a pen name for like different genres for marketing, because there's like this thing where it's like, oh, you can't be a fantasy writer and also write like a contemporary YA romance under the same name. People aren't going to want to read it. And that's like a thing that people regularly tell you, especially around self-publishing. Like you should have different names for the different genres that you write so it's easier to find. And I just hate that. So I was curious what your pen name thing is, because my perception of it is so different. Do you think if you wrote like a different genre, you
Yeah.
would go by the same name, or would you pop in a Hannah?
I still think like I'm most interested in young adult. Like my next series is a YA fantasy. And I just feel like, I don't know. I don't know if I write fast enough or enough books to have multiple pen names. So I feel like I'm going to stay as H.J. Nelson. I just can't see myself. If I ever wrote like middle grade, maybe I would think, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm attached to H.J. Nelson and I don't write books nearly fast enough. I feel like people with pen names are the people who've got like 20 books under romance and 20
Yeah,
books under this. And I'm like, I have 2 published books. Like
right, right.
maybe someday. Do people call you Sammy in real life though?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So that's
I'm
like the name
Yeah,
or do
I'm
you go by
Sammy and
Samantha?
everything.
Oh,
My
okay.
family doesn't even really call me Samantha. They don't call me Sammy. They'll call me Sam.
Oh,
But
okay.
I only really get Samantha if it's like a legal thing or like the
Oh, okay.
bank,
Yeah.
or if I'm in trouble. So I don't really I like don't even respond to Samantha unless it's
Yeah.
in one of those settings where I'm like, my mom is here and I clearly did something wrong, or I'm somewhere that my legal name has to be on something. But even then, like I could be in line for the DMV and they could be like Samantha, and I'd be like, oh, right. Where do your ideas come from?
I've been thinking about this. I never have a good answer to this. So I was trying to think about like an analogy. And for my latest book I've been writing, it was kind of came from 2 ideas that I'd been thinking about for a long time, but I could never get either of the ideas. One was like a boarding school, a girl in a boarding school, and the other was like this medieval princess story. And I couldn't get either of them to work on their own. And then I like mashed them together and I felt like something kind of like magical happened. Like I just started writing. But I think of like my ideas a lot as like a Rubik's Cube. Like a lot of times I just I don't even tell people about them or write them down because I'm like constantly like shifting them and like turning and like being like, oh, would this work like this? Would this work like this? Like I just keep changing the things, like all the things. I'll change the characters, I'll change the setting, and I kind of like just keep shifting it and let it stay kind of like magical until I feel like something is suddenly like, I'm like, whoa, I really like this scene idea or something. And then it'll like all come at once. But sometimes it'll take a long time to like, to, I don't know, gestate or like to just be in my brain before I actually commit to writing it down, which I know is like a lot of people like plot and do those things. But for me, I like think about something for a long time until suddenly I can't help but write it, which was very different than how I wrote The Last She, because The Last She was kind of just like, oh, I had this idea of this girl in the mountains. She's going down to the city to look for her father. And then like, it was kind of like an adventure for me with her because I was just seeing what she ran into as she goes through the city and like making up the story as I go. But also like that way of writing got me a little bit in trouble with the second and third books. That's why I felt like I had to rewrite them, was because I like, once you start going on a path, if you're already posting a book, it's hard to like pull it back if you're like, oh, I don't like that story. So like that's why I kind of like the Rubik's Cube thing, or like I'm just like shifting and turning ideas, like things that I like, things that I saw. Like I really liked, have you ever watched Netflix's Wednesday?
I haven't.
Oh, it's so good.
I'm waiting. I keep trying to get into it and I just like I want to read and then I don't want to watch TV because I spend
Yes.
so much time of my day looking at screens and I'm like, all right,
Oh
book.
yeah.
And I want to. I keep seeing it on social
That's
media and I'm
fair.
like, I need to watch it, but I just haven't had the motivation to do it.
It's very good. It's part of why like I'd forever wanted to write this like boarding school type story. And then I watched Wednesday and I was like, oh, there's like aspects of that that I love. So I kind of like added those to the Rubik's Cube sort of like turning and shifting and trying to like match it to, but I don't like scary gore, like
Mm.
kind of the spooky stuff. I didn't like it was great. Wednesday did it great, but I couldn't do it as great. So
Right.
anyways, yeah, it's kind of like picking all these different things that I love and turning them until I find something that I like suddenly it's just like light bulb, like, oh, I know what it is. And then I go.
Would you consider yourself more of a like pantser type of writer where it's like you've got the idea and then you just run with it and iron it out later?
I have like always wished I was a plotter because plotters can have such a fun time like talking about their process. They're like, oh, I like put post-it notes and I create a map. And it's like it's so you can see it. Like it's so
Mhm.
physical. And like I love that. Whereas I feel like, yeah, I'm such a pantser because to me, the most fun part of writing is like discovering the character and discovering like their adventure and their like secrets and like the mysteries of the world, like discovering it with them. So if I plot it all out and I already know it, like my brain is so contradictory that it'll just say, no, you already know that. We're going to take a completely different path and go on this new, different adventure, completely different than the one you already plotted. I don't know. It's just, the only thing I will plot is like when I'm like dreaming up these ideas, I'll write down my favorite moments, like things that I'm like working towards. I'll be like, oh, I know that she discovers this about her family, or there's this big secret. So I'll have like occasionally like scenes that I feel like the whole novel revolves around that I'll know I'm working to. But how I get to those scenes like can go like I like to surprise myself because I feel like, oh, that's how like you want the reader to be surprised as they're going through. And to me, if I'm surprised, then hopefully the reader is also surprised.
I like that. I'm very much a plotter type of person. So
Okay.
like I have this is one of the projects that I'm working on is
Oh,
all just
nice.
in like note cards of scenes that I know I want to happen, but like it's not necessarily that I know exactly what order they're going to happen. That's why I like the note cards. It's something that I got from screenwriting is if this scene needs to happen and we know that it needs to happen, does it need to happen in the first act or the third act, or can it be moved around? Does putting it later in the story build more tension and stuff like that? So I have similar things where it's like there's a
Mhm.
scene that I want to get to and I know I want what I want to have in the scene. I know like what emotional developments is going to happen in the scene, but I don't know when it's important to have. And like I have
Yeah.
images of the story and then I try to like put it on the Freytag pyramid of like rising action, falling action, climax and make it make sense, but like still have that breathability of it can go somewhere else if it doesn't
Yeah.
feel right. I don't have to delete it. It could just go somewhere else. It just
Yeah.
isn't right here.
I feel like we use these terms like plotter and pantsers, but I still feel like everyone kind of falls falls somewhere in between. You know what I mean? Like, because I guess I technically do. There are things that I plot out. Like if I get lost, I'll go back and look at like the act structure and be like, where am I going wrong here? Yeah, because it is useful to know like the beats and like what plot points you're trying to hit. I feel like the more I write, the more like that comes like kind of intuitively. But yeah, it's hard because I'm like, oh, I think of myself as a pantser, but there's definitely like I feel like everyone has like a little aspects of like both that they do.
Yeah, it's not as hard of a concept as people like to make it. Like, oh, I
Yeah.
could never plot my story. How am I
Yeah.
going to get to know my characters? Where like I will get to know my characters in settings that are outside of the conflict. So
Mhm.
like in my prepping for planning, it's like, okay, so how would this character relate to like being flirted with? Clearly that's not going to come up because it's a story about war, but like how would they interact with that? And like seeing those situations, it gives me time to get to know the characters' voices more and like play with them. So when I end up writing that first chapter, it doesn't feel like it's not connected. I feel like that's something that people who are like, I'm just going to start writing this story and then see what happens. They'll reread the beginning and be like, wow, these are not the same characters that are at the end. I'm going to have to rewrite this whole section so they feel the same because I didn't know them.
Yeah. I feel like with pantsing, sometimes it takes I feel like I probably rewrite a lot more than plotters do because there will be things that I'm like, oh, this like secret is so awesome, but I only found it like at the end of the book, so I have to go back and like lay in the groundwork for it to make sense. But like I don't know, that's kind of like the trade off for me is yeah, I know I spend a ton of time in revision and with like beta readers to make sure that I'm like, oh, did I actually lay the groundwork for this, or did it just like appear way later in my head and I forgot to like tell the readers, oh yeah, this is gonna happen.
Doing that revision process, what is the like ideal timeline for you? Like if you were doing everything perfect, which is never how it goes, what would be the goal timeline for you to like idea for a book to like fully written, edited, and beta feedback ready to send out into the world by whatever platform?
Yeah. So I used to have a really different answer for this. I used to think it took me like 6 months to a year to write a book with another 6 months then to publish it. But with like The Last City was on a quicker timeline because usually by the time you publish your first book, they want the second book like on shelves in like a year. So like stuff got really crunched and I'm supposed to have the first draft of the third book done by like June, which is I don't know if that's going to happen. But then like
I
so I
believe in
used to
you.
like, yeah. But people at my book launch were like asking me like, "Oh, how long does it take to write a book?" And I was like, 6 months to a year. But now I have just started a new book, like my boarding school book, and I'm at like 55,000 words. And it happened in like a matter of weeks. I don't even know where this book came from. Where it's like this weird thing of I feel like now that I kind of know, like I feel like I found my voice a little bit and I like know intuitively more of like where the beats come from and like this book has sort of lived in my head for so long that it like came to the page so quickly and it was like because like I don't know like usually I'm like you have to struggle for a book and they're definitely like all book has like the struggle there's definitely I don't want to take that away there's always the struggle in writing a book but I don't know I feel like it just depends so much on the book. I also like my the Last She and The Last City and The Last Creations, the last one, they have multiple perspective characters, which feels sometimes like writing like 2 or 3 books at once and then pushing them into one. Because some of the storylines are separate and they all come back, like they all intersect again in the third book. But it like literally feels like I'm writing multiple books and then putting them in one book. And it, like that makes it those books feel a lot more I don't even know if I want to say difficult, but like complicated. So it takes me more time. Whereas if I'm writing this other book that's like a single perspective, you're only in one person's head. And I guess I just thought about it for so long that it comes easier. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's like a right answer. It also has a lot to do with like what's going on in your life. Like when I was, I have little kids, 2 kids right now that are small and take so much time where I'm like, sometimes I try not to like compare myself to other writers who are like busting out multiple books a year. And I'm like, you know what? Like, this is like where I'm at in my life. I can usually write about 1 book a year. And that's it for me. That might change someday in the future if I go more like full time, but I don't know. How about you? How much do you feel like you write?
I have never finished anything like through a full revision process. So like most of the work that I've done that I'm like this is complete has been in college and in college they were like, "Oh great, you wrote a draft. Let's do the next project. We're going to learn something else and this is the goal of this project." So it's like you did this thing and you finished. Congrats. But it's not good. Like there's things that need to be fixed by it. I actually just recently pulled a play that I wrote in college that I was like, oh, this has so much potential. It was so good when I wrote it. And I reread it and I was like, this is trash. This was so bad. But it still has that potential to be something. I just have to revise it. And I'm like so discouraged by the process of revising it. So I started working on a different play because naturally, when you don't want to do the thing that you wanted to do, you just find something that's more fun to do when nobody's expecting anything from you. And I finished the first draft of that. And it's not a book. It's like 45 pages of dialogue and it's a totally different format. There's a lot less thinking and consistency that goes into writing a play than a book. So like that's not at all comparable, but I finished writing the first draft of that as my like writing routine for this year was I wanted to write 15 minutes every day and I've got my first draft done and my 15 minutes every day now is just reading through and being like this can be better because of this. We know that this character has this experience so we need to show that more and this is an opportunity to do that. So I think that if I continue at this pace of doing like a very small amount every day until like I don't feel motivated to do anymore. I have to do a minimum of 15 minutes and then I can say like I did it. But I'm on a good track to like have a second or third draft finished in like 2 or 3 months. Just crazy because it would be the first thing that I've finished and revised and then like sent to people to give me feedback, which is the goal to do. So I would think it would be awesome for me to finish writing a book in general. I am not the most confident in narrative writing because I was a cinema major with a theater minor and a writing certificate. So like it went down. I'm really, really confident in screenwriting. I'm so confident in screenwriting. And then playwriting, I'm like, yeah, this is good. We can do this. And then narrative writing, it's like, okay, I want to be as good as all of the people that I read, but I don't know how. Okay.
Yeah, don't be discouraged though, because I feel like all of us write, like no writing goes wasted, right? Like I wrote so much stuff that I'm just like, like it wasn't wasted to write those books on Wattpad because now I like feel like I'm a much better writer for them, like even if they don't get published or whatever. And like I also think because I did an my English major at University of Wisconsin, and some of the screenwriters and playwriters had the best dialogue of any like writers. Like every time I would read their short stories, I'd be like, man, like these guys are like on point. So I feel like there's a lot of, I mean, I've never written like a screenplay. It's intimidating to me, but I mean, I think there's similar skills that you'll pull across and it's not, yeah. And also, okay, the other thing I was going to say is don't don't just diminish yourself. Like slow and steady definitely wins the race. I still look at all my first drafts. I'm like, oh, what is this? Like, yeah, and it's always like, that's kind of the cool thing about having my old books up on Wattpad because I'll go read them and be like, oh, like who wrote, like, did I do this? Ooh. Where like having like a professional editor go through them and like help me like made such a big difference. Whereas I'm like, oh, like having that professional go through it, like my book wouldn't be nearly the book it is without them. Whereas like, you pick up a book and sometimes I think you're tempted to think like, oh, author just like sat down and like wrote this on their own, like perfectly the first try, which is like not true at all. But anyways, I'm just trying to encourage you. Like
Yeah,
15 minutes a day, that wins. Like you'll get a lot done with that. It really adds up.
it has been because I've prior to this, I was like, oh yeah, I should really get a writing routine. I should really just do it. And I didn't have any like structure around it. And I am very responsible. Like I will take on a lot of responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right now, I like to say that I have 3 jobs and one of them is YouTube, but I don't get paid by YouTube. So it's like,
Yeah.
is it worth it? But it's like I post a video 2 days a week, every week, and that's a responsibility that I have. So why not make writing a responsibility because that's something that is consistently motivating for me and it's been working.
Mhm.
I set the rule that I couldn't miss 2 days in a row and then I got sick for like 3 days and I just had no interest in doing it and I was like, I missed so many days. I'm so
Oh.
upset. And then I went like 5 days afterwards without missing any and I'm like, it's fine, we're back in it, we're back to it, it's good, we'll get this done. And something else that I've been doing that I think is very helpful is reading the acknowledgments section in people's books where they're like, oh my gosh, this project was 10 years in the making. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Awesome. Great. It
Yeah.
took you so long to do this, so I'm probably on track.
Yeah. No, I think definitely. It's hard to give like a timeline for stuff because I think every project is just so different. And you'll never regret like building that writing muscle because like that's what I was doing with my first Wattpad book. I had to post a chapter every single week and it was like there were so many weeks where I didn't want to write a chapter. I thought I was like too busy, but I just like built the muscle that like this is the expectation I have for myself. If I ever want to be a writer, I have to actually write. And like now I feel like writing is kind of like it is the thing I do that's like my therapy or like my joy. Like I like
Yeah.
escape into it. But there's also those days where it's not an escape. It's like, oh, I have to like I'm on deadline for this. I have to do it. So like I feel like if you have both of those things, like there's going to be days where it's a joy and there's going to be times where it's a lot of work. But I think at the end, if you like mash them together, I don't know, I'd like to think that readers don't notice, like the days where you worked really hard and it was hard work and the days where it was joy. Like if you have those in a book, you're going to go through and like edit it and it'll become the same.
Yeah. I have to ask because I'm just genuinely curious. I love books that have multiple perspectives. It's like my favorite type of reading. So I anticipate the book that I have planned to be my first book to actually work on after I get more confident in this writing routine is going to be a multiple perspective book. I've heard from different people who post about their writing like systems, that there are a lot of different methods for getting those multiple perspectives together. You said that it feels like you're writing three separate books or multiple separate books because they're parallel storylines. Do you write them like in the order that they're going to go into the book, or do you write like this is what's happening with Ara, this is what's happening with Caden, and then mash them together?
I wish I had more order because I feel like my writing process is just like chaos. I sort of like plot out, I'll make like maybe I am a plotter. I'll make like three graphs of like, or however many characters I have. Like, what do I want this character to like learn and change in this particular story? What is their arc in each thing? And then I think about like just a few key points of what that character is going to like needs to do for that to happen. Yeah, I guess it takes a little more plotting when I have like all these characters because I have to make sure what's happening time wise. But again, like a lot of that, I'll like plot out how I want them to change, how I want them to do that. And then I'll go into the story and write like, okay, I write one from like Ara's, one from Caden's, and then kind of figure out like, okay, where are they going to intersect here and what needs to happen next? So I don't really write them independently, but I do think independently about how each one is going to change in each book. I wonder if it like the reason I don't write it as three separate stories is I want to like I like having like the tension of like, oh, Caden or someone was so close to this other person, they just missed them, or like kind of having the through like the stories feeling out like, oh, this story right now, there's a lot happening. So I'm gonna have like a little bit of like more like something peaceful happening. So I like kind of playing off of each one. Like it's fun for me to know like the reader knows this but the characters don't know this. Yeah, I don't even know. A lot of it is just kind of figuring out as I go and then getting the reader feedback and the editor feedback and going back because there was definitely like I definitely got feedback from my editor that like Caden didn't sound enough like Caden in the first draft, that there were times that he didn't have like enough voice, which I tried to bring in. And it's like a weird process because you're like still learning. So like in the third book has the most perspective characters, which makes it in some way the most difficult just to like wrangle all the characters and make sure they're all kind of like they're all meeting where I want them to meet. But I feel like this one has also been the most fun because like the more perspectives you have, like the more challenging it is, but it feels like the higher, like it's like higher risk, higher reward sort of. And then I also like that the third book is like, since it's the final book, you get to like finally resolve all these storylines. Whereas the second book to me, and like, I don't know, do you feel like this in like trilogies? The second book, it's usually my least favorite book because it has to be like a bridge between the first and last. It's really hard to have its own like complete storyline, but like I don't know, it's just really fun in the third book to finally get to like conclude everything and to bring all the characters that have been like separated for so long, bring them all back and finally like find resolution. Now I'm trying to think of an example of a trilogy though. Well, like Shadow and Bone, I thought the first book was the best, the second book was probably my least favorite, and then the third was like in the middle. I don't know.
I can say with full confidence that I think the second book in the Divergent series was my favorite because I felt like
Insurgent?
yeah, I think so. And the third
Okay.
one was Allegiant. I felt like
I
the
can't.
ending of the third book just
Oh,
sort of
yes.
ruined everything.
The
And then
controversial ending.
yeah. Oh man. I think that was the start. Reading that in what, like 2014 was the start of my, yeah, I can do better. I could
Yeah.
totally do better. But I definitely think that the second book of that series was my favorite there.
I guess maybe it just differs by every trilogy. For
Um,
me, the hardest one was the second. I also think there's this weird thing of when you write a first book, or maybe it's just when you get published. When you publish a first book, there is suddenly like this like horrible fear, imposter syndrome, like, oh crap, I have to do this again. Like, like what if I can't? What if that was just a fluke? Like, which I hope, I don't know, I hope that I've not overcome that feeling, but I hope I can work through it a little more for the third book. It's also weird, like you were saying for the Divergent series, there like comes a time when you're like, oh, like books aren't perfect. And it's okay to like talk about how they aren't perfect. And like the same thing with my book. I'm like, I know my book isn't perfect. Like there's plenty of things that I wish I could have made better. I just only have so much skill as a writer, like I'm trying to make each book better than the last. But it is funny, like growing up, I felt like I couldn't critique books. And now I think it's fun to see like what people think about books because I think it makes you a much better storyteller and writer when you like look at stories and like acknowledge, yeah, there's like a lot in the story that makes it really good. Like there's a reason people love it, but there's also things that could have been different or better or yeah.
that's sort of the reason why I structure my videos the way that I do when I'm critiquing books is like, this is all of the stuff that I really enjoyed. And then, like, the things that, for my personal experience of reading it, I think could have been better.
Yeah.
Because there's always, like, for any individual reading any story, there's always going to be something that's like, I don't like that. And it comes from whatever their personal background is. And having that way of thinking about things has made it easier for me to look at my own writing and be like, okay, you can do better than that. Come on, give these people some character. They're so one dimensional. They have things going on. They do. They're the main character of their own story. And like, being
Yeah.
able to see those things in other people's writing and like
Mhm.
thinking about them in a way that I want to think about my own writing has made it easier to do that.
Since you're like a screenwriter and playwriter, do you break down movies the same way you break down books?
So this is the thing that I've discovered about going to film school. When you're done, if you don't work in the film industry, you kind of just hate the film industry because you know too much about how it works and like how things happen. So I don't really have fun watching movies anymore. TV shows are different because I didn't really like spend a lot of time focusing on that format of writing, but there are like whole books that you can read that tell you like this is what needs to happen by this page of a screenplay and this is how the conflict needs to develop by this page of a screenplay, and the pages are equivalent to minutes. So I can start watching a movie that's like following this textbook structure and be like, oh, okay, that's the bad guy. And we're going to find out in like 17 minutes. And then people are like, no, that's not the 17 minutes, 18 minutes go by. That's the bad guy. And it's like, how did you know that? You're a wizard. I just read too many books on how this works. And there's this thing that's going on right now with movies that is like so sad to me because I love the storytelling aspect of visual storytelling. I like to be told a story where they're diving very heavily into the visual aspect of it. And it's more like, what can we CGI? How can we make this look super, super dope? And like, who cares about the characters developing? We just need to like show how this magic works and the like explosions of that. And it's like, I paid money to come see this, and it's not even, there's no, the conflict doesn't even make any sense because the character didn't have any motivation to engage with the conflict other than like it would look cool. So I've been very like saddened by movies coming out. The Kingsman movie franchise, it's like a comic book but turned into a movie. Like the movements of the camera, it's all very beautifully done in my opinion. It's a very different, unique way of doing an action movie. I saw the first one in high school and I was like, wow, I really like that. I think that's my favorite movie. So,
I do remember that. Yeah. They're like
um,
spies or something like that,
yeah,
right? Okay,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And they're like just British people basically that are like, they've got knives in their shoes and stuff. And it's like this very unique way of doing filmmaking. And said that was my favorite movie for like years because say like, what's your favorite book? I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't. Why do I need to have one? They made the prequel for it, which was The King's Man, that came out in 2021, I think. And I was so excited for it because I was like, I love
Oh
this
no.
franchise. The second one wasn't as good, but it was still like really good for my experience of it. And we watched the prequel and it was just there was no story. None of the
Yeah.
characters like thought about anything before making any actions because we knew they had the enough information to make the right decision, but they chose the one that was better for the plot. And I was like, ruin the whole franchise for me.
Hey.
Thanks. Great. So
Yeah.
I've just sort of been like on a downward trend with watching movies since then because it's like,
I
why?
feel like movies have been on a downward trend because of COVID and I think because of like TV shows are like the new thing. Like I feel like all the great storytelling is being told in these like longer formats. Whereas like I feel like I haven't seen a good movie. I did like the second Avatar though. I will say that. I liked it. But again, it was like so visually interesting that it's almost hard to be like, I think the characters in the story were good, I think, but I like it's like the visual part of it was so just like incredible. It's almost like you almost appreciate that more than the story. And you're like, oh
Right.
no, I like need to appreciate the story more because it was a good story. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so visually like thrilling.
And that's what the market is going for these days is like looking at cool pretty things. Like I want to go into the movies to see something that I can't see at home that like is that visual experience
Yeah.
or like auditory experience. They do a lot more with the sound design and not necessarily put as
Mhm.
much budget into actually developing the characters and stuff. But I go to the movies for the story of the movie.
Yeah.
So I'm not like the general public on the market for that. And I understand that. I haven't seen the second Avatar because I saw the first one and we sat in the first row because it was like packed. So I associate that with getting so motion sick that I threw up into a popcorn bucket. So I'm waiting to
Oh.
watch that on a TV because I'm very scared of the big screen experience
Oh
for it.
yeah. Watch it if yeah.
Yeah. And
You don't
I'm
like
like,
the 3D. Yeah, I wouldn't go in for that because it's like it's the best. I think it's the best 3D movie I've ever seen, but it's definitely like there's a lot going on screen.
I think it would be fine if I saw it not in the front row, but that's just like my memory of being like 11 or 12 when the first one came out and just sitting in the very first row of the movie theater, which is also like bananas to think about that that movie came out when I was like in preteens,
Yeah.
but
It's been so long and that they just yeah. I watched the last Lord of the Rings movie in theater and it was in like on the ground floor or whatever, like the most closest you could get to the camera in the corner. And I remember the drums just being like rattling my skull. And it was like which like I don't have good memories of that movie. I know it's a great movie,
right.
but like my memories of seeing it in the theater were just like like
From that experience, like I don't ever really want to watch Avatar because I threw up and that's not fun, and that's like a weird thing that happens in general, and I feel like that doesn't happen as much with books besides like maybe your emotional experience. Like I read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue when I was feeling really homesick, so I was like, this book is great if you're feeling really homesick. It really connects to that emotion, but I don't know if that's true or if I was just feeling homesick at the time that I read it, which
Well,
is
she's an incredible writer. I have only read the beginning of that book because it was due at the library and had to return it in or had to turn it in. I still think about it. I still think about the beginning of that story and that writing, and I'm like, I just need to go buy that book, like, because it was so well written. And like, I also kind of like that. Like, do you ever have something where a story is so good that you don't want to finish it? So I'm
yes.
like, I just like want this story, like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It like lives in my brain forever if I don't know what happened to her, and I kind of like that.
I honestly think that the ending of that book, to not give you any spoilers, but the ending of that book keeps that feeling, even though
Oh,
you finished it because of how she chose to finish the story.
maybe I should.
That
I
I'm like,
love stories like that. They give you that
um,
sense of the story goes on, you know?
yeah. Yeah, it ends in a very meta kind of way that it's like, is this eternal? Is she actually living forever in the
Ah,
world that I live in? No.
interesting.
Maybe?
I need to
No.
finish that book. I just need to buy it. That's what I need to do because I like thinking about it and like people. I've had so many people tell me about it, and I love the writing. Who is that author? Is that
V.E.
Schwab or Schwab? I can never say
Rob?
her last name. She's very good. She's like the kind of author. I feel like we all have those people who are like, I could never be as good as that. Like she's just so good that it's like, and that's like the other thing as a writer. Do you ever read something and you're like, oh, I like love this book, but I like kind of hate this author because they're just like so good that like it's
Yeah.
like the bad thing of being a writer is like sometimes your writer brain gets in the way of just being like, oh, this is like perfect. Darn you.
I kind of decided that Taylor Jenkins Reid is my favorite author right now because I haven't like given any of her books less than like 4.5 stars.
Oh yeah.
And I just listened to one of her first books. I think it was either her first or her second book, After I Do, on audiobook. And it was just like everything was fitting together so well. And then like the characters all were very like consistent and all of these things. And there she's got this thing that she does that it's like poetry for some of the descriptions where the lines make lyrical experience, and listening to it I was like, what the heck, woman, what is this? And then at the end of that audiobook that my library had, I don't know if it's the like standard one, it was her and Julia Whalen just like talking about her books and like the audiobook experience of doing her books because Julia Whalen does all of her audiobooks, I guess. So I was like, this is the kind of insight that I read the acknowledgments for, and this is just like a casual conversation. Excuse you. And she even said like she thinks that she should always use $1. Why use a $10 word when a $1 word will do? And I'm like, but you do it so well. How do you? How what?
That's because I feel like some writers they have like their like $1 word to me is like $100 word. I'm like, they must have amazing vocabulary. And some people I feel like are just blessed. Like their prose is so, I don't know. I don't know how some people do it.
Naturally comes out like that. And to go back to my questions, just so we can like touch on all
Yes.
of them before running out of time. Do you make a living from writing, or are you still like navigating the rest of the world with all of us peasants?
Definitely don't make a living for my writing. I make more now than I used to, but not much more. I feel like my plan was always that I would try to learn the craft and like grow when my kids were little because I stay at home with my kids. So I'm a stay-at-home mom right now. I used to like work or I was in college. So like my hope was always that when the kids got more like into school and I had more time as a stay-at-home mom, then I would like go a little more like gung ho and try to do more of like the promotion and the social media and like all the stuff that comes along with being an author. But for now, I just try and do like I'm trying to focus more on kind of like the joy that writing brings me because sometimes it feels like that's kind of like I already barely had time for that. So like that's kind of my focus like now is like building my craft because I feel like I just have so much more to learn. I don't know, I like always want to keep learning. But yeah, I don't make a living from my writing. But I enjoy it very much. That's more of like my goal right now. Yeah, I don't even know too. Like I know like a lot of people want to make a living from the writing, but like it's so hard for me to give advice to those people except for like saying like don't quit your day job like right away just because
Yeah.
it takes so long to get a book and to get it out and all the things where it's like don't quit your day job and like have multiple be like you have multiple things that you're doing all that's like kind of what you have to do as a writer is have all these like multiple places where revenue comes from but yeah.
I feel like if you are somebody who wants to do writing as like for the sake of doing the craft, it shouldn't be about money. So like the people that are like, I want to make a living from writing. I want to make a living from writing.
Yeah,
I did
we
that
all do.
for like I actually wrote for a living. It wasn't creative writing. It wasn't really fun. It was marketing sales writing. And the topic that I wrote about was not a good one. It was dog cancer for a really amazing company, but I was doing a lot of research on the sadder side of what they do to be like, we can be helpful for you to not hit the sadder side, which is Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but that, like, writing for a living for other people took a lot out of me, where writing for myself for fun as a hobby fills my cup instead of emptying
Yeah.
it. So it's something that I think if there is a world where you're like, I want to be a writer, I want to write all the time, you should find something to do that doesn't take a lot of your like mental, emotional energy and
Yeah.
just do that, and then save all of that for like, I'm going to be creative when I'm not working, or a job that, if they exist anymore, where you can do other things while you're working. Those were the kinds of jobs that I targeted in college so I could do my homework while getting paid. Working in a front desk in a hotel overnight. That's something that I've been told is really great for writers, because you sit there all night and get like 3 phone calls and you have a computer in front of you most of the
That's what
time. So
Brandon Sanderson did, right? Brandon
probably
Sanderson talks about that. That's how he wrote like his first couple books, was he worked like midnight shift at a hotel.
my brain shuts down at like 10 p.m. So that wouldn't work for me, unfortunately.
I
But
love writing at night. I would write all night if I didn't have the kids who woke me up at 6 a.m. Like, rise
right.
and shine.
I wish. I feel like people who write at night are like at a different tier of creativity than me, where like I can wake up at 8 a.m. and like sit down and write, but then I have to go and live my real life. But if you could like 10 p.m. to whenever you end up falling asleep, you've got your whole world ahead of you. You may be tired tomorrow, but like there's no stopping
Yeah.
that momentum. And I'm kind of jealous of that, but I also do be getting my sleep.
Yeah.
So
Oh, me too. Yeah, no, there's so much interesting stuff to talk about for like wanting to make it like to make a full-time living as a writer. Cause I feel like I don't right now have the time and energy that goes into the side of like there's the writing side of being a full-time writer, but then like the difficult part for me is all the other stuff. Like you really have to be on top of like all the marketing and promotion and all of that. And I'm sure my publisher wishes I was like more on top of that stuff, but like it's hard because you're already like, man, I'm already, writing all these books and stuff. And
right.
and that's, that's a lot of time and energy and trying to like do all the other stuff while, we're all trying to do our other jobs or whatever on top of it. So yeah, it does. I don't know if I have any good answers for it.
That's fair. I mean, you've only got 2 books, so we're
Yeah.
here. We're marketing your books. We're
Yeah.
marketing you as an author
It's true.
for the. You can tell your publishers that you went out of your way.
Doing things. Check. Yeah. I wonder too, like have you ever wondered like how many books it takes to like for people to go full time? Because I know like, do you know who Beth Reckles is? She wrote The Kissing Booth.
I now know. I don't
Yeah, so
like. I didn't
she
recognize
has
the name, but
multiple crazy successful Netflix movies of The Kissing Booth. The Kissing Booth itself was like a bestseller. Anyways, she worked for many years after that in IT and only like went full time, like I think like a couple years ago. Like I follow on Instagram, but I thought it was so very interesting that like this huge, who I would consider like mega successful author, kept working like I think it was an IT job. It was just like really interesting to
and
see.
that probably doesn't take up a lot of that creative energy
Yeah.
space. It's like problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if it's like a different part of the brain, kind of. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a go-to number. I know that in a lot of the like people who give advice for self-publishing authors, if you want to make a living off of self-publishing your books, you should have 20 books before you consider it like a full-time thing, which is
Oh
so
man.
many,
Yeah, that took you like 20 years.
right? Like I think at a certain point you would have to be writing poorly, like not
Yeah.
at the highest level that you're capable of to be able to do that.
Yeah. You got to
But
be churning out books.
yeah, but there are some genres that people don't really care if it's like
Mm,
the same book but with different characters, which is something I've
yeah.
heard about John Green's books, is that I've only read Paper Towns, but apparently all of his books have like the same protagonist, the same love interest, but they're in a different setting. I
I
can
really
comprehend
I
it.
love John Green. But Paper Towns is my least favorite book by him.
Interesting. I
So
didn't
you
like
should
it.
try The Fault in Our Stars is maybe the only book that has ever made me both like bawl and laugh like hysterically. Like I was laughing so there's a scene in it. Have you seen the movie
I have, yeah.
where they take the blind guy and they're egging the girlfriend's car, and like in the book it is the funniest scene I have ever read on paper. It is like so much better in the book. You have to read the book. The book is like,
Okay.
I like the movie. I like that actress. I like those actors. I thought they did a good job with the movie. Like I thought it was a good representation, but like the book was amazing. But I can see kind of there are similar things like tropes that show up in a lot of his books. And Turtles All the Way Down was very it was hard to read, but really good. I don't know if that makes sense. Like
That does
hard,
make
not
sense.
hard to read as in poorly written, hard to read as like the topic that it talked about was really just like, it like got you like right in the heart.
I remember in high school, there was like, we had our summer reading list, and I was the kid that would read all of the ones that were on the list, even though you only had to read one by the end of the summer. Um, on that list, there was Paper Towns one year, and on another list, there was An Abundance of Catherines. And
I haven't read that.
I started reading it, and I was like, wow, I hate this character. I don't care about anything. I don't even care if he becomes like a better character by the end of it. I don't like him, and I stopped reading it. That's just sort of my association that I've had with John Green, has been, ugh, that main character, ick.
Gotta read wait, what's it called again? The Fault in Our Stars, which I still can't remember why it's called that. It has like nothing to do with the book. That one was so, it's like one of my favorite books.
I don't think I've read any books more than once. Actually,
Yeah,
I've
I'm
read one.
sometimes afraid to. Aren't you afraid? Like, what if I reread it and it's not as good? Like,
I don't think they are as good the second time, because I like grasp onto aspects of the story, and maybe I don't remember the whole plot, but I'll remember the thing that made me go, "Oh my gosh," or like the
yeah.
biggest thing. So I'll start rereading a book. I used to do this all the time in like my youth, because I would check out all of the books at the library. I also would read
Yes.
a book in a day. I would get like tagged out from dodgeball just as soon as possible, so I could just go sit on the side at summer camp and read my books. You weren't allowed to not participate, but if you got out. So I would like go and I would pick up books, and I'd be like, oh, this cover looks good. This cover looks good. And I'd forget that I'd already read it. And then I'd get like 2 chapters in and be like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And then like go on. So I just like, I might be better at it now, because now I'm able to like look into more things. So maybe there would be something that I missed in my first read. But in my youth, I was like, oh, I already know the story. Goodbye.
Yeah. That's true. I have a few books that I like comfort read every now and then, where I'm like, oh, I just need to like go back into that world, and it's just like comforting. But for the most part, I like reading new things.
There's so many books out there.
Yeah, exactly.
You said that you just started posting on Wattpad to be able to get more into the like consistency of writing and getting feedback on writing and like stretching that muscle. And the way that The Last She got published was because Wattpad came to you, and because agents were like, no, we can't do that. People can already read it. Is there a reason that you chose to go with continuing to post on Wattpad when you knew this story had potential, rather than looking into like self-publishing or like a more traditional format of self-publishing, rather than going through Wattpad?
I like the support that Wattpad had given me. Like I wrote, they brought me other like professional opportunities. Like I got to write something for National Geographic and General Electric. And like they had these, and they were like paid opportunities. So I felt like they were the only ones kind of out there that were like giving me the time of day and like giving me opportunities. Like these other agents were very, and I think like agents are just, they're so busy that they don't want to, I was someone unknown with this book that's online, and they're kind of just like, I think agents were just kind of like not afraid of me, but they're afraid a little bit of Wattpad, because Wattpad at that point was like just kind of taking up more space in the industry, and it's already like a crowded, competitive industry. So I feel like I kind of just decided to go with Wattpad because they were the ones who like believed in the story. They were the ones who said, yeah, we can make this happen. We can turn it into a series. I think originally they just signed it as one book, and that's kind of just all I thought it would be, was that I didn't know if they would take the next 2. And they spent a lot of time and energy on me. The editor I work with, I felt like really pushed me for the first book to like, we did a lot of revisions, a lot of edits. I felt like there was a lot of things that kind of were like, there's different like things you do on Wattpad that kind of can identify you a little bit as like a Wattpad writer, kind of like like the fan fiction tendencies people tend to have, that I had picked a ton of, like, because I'd been on Wattpad for like a couple years at that point. So, I had some of these tendencies that like I had to like hammer out of me and try and pull out of the book. Yeah, so I just feel like it kind of just was the best path forward for me. I knew that it was just so tied up with Wattpad. Like it was a Wattpad story. People on Wattpad knew it. That was kind of where it had come from. Like it was like it existed for Wattpad at that point. And it would have had to I would have had to write something different and something else. And kind of like I said, I'm not that fast of a writer. It just sort of like worked out. I don't know if there was ever, I guess I did query it to other people. Yeah. But it was sort of just no one was interested in it but Wattpad, I guess.
Did you ever think about publishing it yourself or
No.
no?
I
Okay.
just I don't know, like the part of writing that brings me joy is like the writing, and the
Mhm.
promotion like sometimes slowly kills me. So like the thought
Totally
of
fair.
trying to figure all that out on my own was so overwhelming, especially with like, I don't know, just like with having little kids, there's a lot of like stress and like, yeah, like I just didn't want my writing to become something that like I hated or I resented. It was the thing that was like helping me get through difficult situations in life and difficult like times. It is more of out of my respect for self-publishing people. Like I see how much incredible amount of work goes into it that I just didn't ever think I could do it, to be perfectly honest. And I don't
That's
think,
totally fair.
yeah, I don't think moving forward I would ever self-publish. I don't know. It's the hardest part for me is that like promotion marketing aspect. And like I know it's not that I'm like dumb and don't think I could learn it. It's just that I like
You
don't
don't
like
want to
it.
put the energy. Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Yeah.
I only have so much energy right now as a mom with littles, and like I just don't want to put that energy there right now. Right now I want to put it in my writing. So, I don't know, maybe someday I'll change my mind. I know like self-publishing, people are like making tons of money out there self-publishing. Like good for them. I love like seeing other authors succeeding in it. I just don't think I could.
That's totally fair. I fully respect that. And I appreciate that you said like you see the amount of work that self-published authors are going through and that's just not what you can manage right now. Because there are some people who are like, oh, but like they're self-published, which means nobody wanted it. And that's not fair.
No.
There are so many. I genuinely enjoy self-published books. I try to do at least one per month reviewing. So like it's a lot of work to do. And some people are just set up better for that level of effort.
Yeah.
And then some people just have too many other things going on to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, because traditional publishing is just such an interesting space that there's only space for like the things they decide, kind of. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I love that there's self-publishing out there. Cause like I have a friend, Conda Douglas, who's like probably my closest writer friend that I talk to a lot. And she self-publishes like these like short, like they're called like write short and like all about how to write quickly and write short things. And anyways, it's just like I love the stuff that she writes, but they're like there's just not like a space for it in traditional publishing. So it's nice that like writers and readers have created like our own space that like gets to do its like make its own rules. Because sometimes too traditional publishing is just like with my Hunger Games and Spacebook, or just like, oh, that trope is out. It's just dead
Right.
now. I'm like, but you know
Right.
what? Readers actually kind of like that trope.
They do. They
Yeah.
do. I am definitely one of them. Yep, they do. It's also interesting to see what traditional publishing people say is like good. I saw this TikTok recently because Black History Month there was a lot of promotion for Black authors and getting Black stories into people's hands, and I came across this TikTok that was a content creator talking about why in fantasy books that are set in a world that's outside of our own by Black authors, there's racism in it. When you go to a fantasy book to be in a different world, why does there need to be racism in it if they have like a whole different history and all of that stuff? And apparently, traditional publishing really likes for there to be racism. And like, if you go
Interesting.
to self published Black authors telling fantasy stories with Black characters in these fantasy worlds, there's usually not racism and they can't get published traditionally because they're like, well, it's not really, how are we going to connect to it? And it's like, it's a fantasy book. How much do we need that societal influence in it to be able to connect to it?
Yeah. When it's like, can we let the author like tell their story the way they want to tell their story? Which is, yeah, which is the interesting about self-publishing. Like it lets people tell their stories the way they want to, instead of the way this tiny group of people says, this is what
People,
readers want. We
right.
know, where it's like, you don't know, you have all the control over it.
Right. And there was, what was that book?
But yeah.
We Were Liars. I did not like that book at all because it didn't make any sense. There was like a lot of things that were just sort of missing. And somebody talked to the author at like a book signing or something. And she's like, yeah, a editor took out this major scene. they said it was too slow and the book was already long. So they wanted to take out this scene that explained all of this stuff. So now it just doesn't really connect
What?
anymore. And I was like, that's insane. If you self published, I probably would have liked your book more, but less people
Wow.
would have read it. And like, what's the trade off? To have the story that you want to be told read by fewer people, or to have a lot of people read your book that's maybe not up to that par that you were hoping for or that you
Yeah.
originally wrote it into? Because somebody said, this is too slow. It's boring.
Wow. Yeah, I think it shows too, like editors can have a really big influence over books. Like your editor, because they can sometimes be like that silent person that you don't see, because there's like traditional publishing and then there's the authors, but like editors
Yeah.
have a huge influence over books. Like my editor had a very big influence over my books. Like in a good way, but I could also see that like an editor who doesn't have the same experience telling an author to take that experience out of a book or take like the heart of it, like that could be like soul crushing.
Right.
I haven't read We Are Liars. Is that by E. Lockhart or who's that by?
Yeah.
Okay, I need to. Unless I have read it a long time ago. It sounds so. I can like picture the cover.
It's one of TikTok's like book recommendations for
Oh,
that
okay.
genre. So a lot of people have been talking about it, especially when it came out. The second book came out recently, but I just like had no connection to it because it just felt like it was missing something.
I
Turns
wonder
out
if
it
the second
was.
book will like, because I feel like as an author, you kind of start out being like having so little power, but like if the first book did like it's so famous now, do you think she'll have like more power in the second book to say like, no, this is the story I want to tell. I'm going to tell it, like more authorial control?
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, it's a
Hard to
hard
say.
question. I don't know.
I'm scared of that. Like that somebody can just decide that my story is something that it's not. And that's what it's going to have to be if we want to sell it. So I think I'm going to probably end up going the self publishing route for the sake of my ego, because I don't know how much I could take having professional people tell me, like, no, this is bad. We're not going to do this. Or like, this is great, but the next one. I'm so fragile. I don't think I could deal with that. And that's like a big part of writing. And I know that that's a big part of writing if you want to publish. But I think that there's also that space where it's like, this is just
Yeah.
not a story that people want to read, but it is something that I would want to read. So I'm sure there's more people who would want to read it, but they just don't think so. There is an author, Bethany Tizadeh. She's on YouTube. She did the Stolen Kingdom series and
Oh
some.
yeah, I've heard of her. I think I've watched her stuff. Is she still on YouTube?
Yeah, she
Oh, okay.
recently had a baby, so she's been
Oh,
in and out because
oh, okay. That's fair.
mommy. But she self-published. She does all of her books self-published, and like they're really good. And they're like she just puts in the effort up front. And I've got a very like logistical mind. Like I can do that kind of stuff and like plan for things and organize stuff and like put things on calendars and make things go out and all of that stuff. That's like what I do for work and all of that kind of thing. So I'm totally comfortable doing all of the extra work for self-publishing. And I don't have any kids. I've got a very needy dog and that's it. So that's workable. So that's probably what I would end up doing just to like avoid the horror stories of traditional publishing.
I mean, it sounds like too, like you already know, like if you have a YouTube channel, you know the work that goes into like creative endeavors. And I think like the people that don't succeed at self-publishing are the ones who aren't prepared at the amount of work that's going to go into it and don't have like that realistic, like if you push the book out and just don't say anything about it, like it's
Right.
nothing's going to happen to it. But
Yeah.
you already know and you're like are prepared. And that's like those are the people that succeed self-publishing.
Especially if you already have an audience. That's also like
Yeah,
a super big bonus. Like
that's huge.
Astrid, Lightlark, the author of Lightlark. She did like a lot of TikTok posting. It became like a big drama thing in the book talk community where she said this thing is going to happen in my book and then it didn't happen in her book.
Oh no.
But I haven't read it. I hadn't really seen any of the content that she posted about it. And I heard all of the drama secondhand from somebody else. So like I know about it. She marketed her book while she was writing it. And then she got a traditional publishing deal because she had this huge following on TikTok. And then the book went out and it like sold out everywhere very fast. And then people were like, hey, you said this was going to be in your book and then it wasn't. And it got a different kind of buzz where people were like, why is everybody so mad about this book? And then it got more sales. Being in the system that you were most comfortable with, you don't even have to really do that much effort. Like, she was already on TikTok. She was already making TikToks. She just decided to start posting about her book too. And then it got her somewhere. I've got a YouTube channel. I like doing it.
Yeah.
When I write a book, I will probably bring people along for the journey of like, I'm at this point in writing my book. I'm at this point in publishing my book. This is the cover of my book someday. And like, the people who
people do that. That's my favorite, to see people like document their process. I wish I had documented mine more, but
don't start now.
Nah.
My last question.
Okay.
If you could give yourself from 5 to 10 years ago some advice, what would you tell her about writing?
Okay, I thought about this before. I would say to like protect your joy of writing and the bond you have with writing above anything else. Because for a long time, I sort of like sacrificed that, where I'd be like, oh, it's going to be worth it to like sell more books, or it's going to be worth it to get like this great publisher. Or, like, you know, I would do things, I would make choices that would not hold that up. So that's what I'm trying to like kind of rebuild sometimes, is that like that joy that I have of writing. I'm trying to do that more, because I am like a hardworking person who's like, just put your head down and like write and just like get it done all the time. And like, that hasn't always served me well. I think it's okay to do what you need to do, whether it's like step back or take time to like, or to make like, to even make choices that aren't about like strategy or career or money, like to make them for, oh, like this is for the joy of writing, what takes me in that direction. So that's what I would tell myself. And that's what I'm still like working on. That's what I'm kind of working on now, is trying to like ask myself that like daily, like, how is this bringing me joy?
I love that. That's great. Thank you for chatting with me today, Hannah. This was a lot of fun. I'm really glad we had the opportunity to do this. For all of those of you watching this in the future from this moment, you can get both of these books. They are available everywhere that you can buy books.
Yes. And the ebook is worldwide.
The ebook is worldwide, and I have a video on the last sheet. It was a great read. That's why we're here, ready to dive in to the second book and enjoy the future books to come from our lovely author, H.J. Nelson. But that is it for today. I will be back on Saturday for a story study video. Hopefully we'll see Hannah again some other time. Maybe when the next book comes out, we'll have another chat.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.